Jeremy Clarkson looked like a man failing at farming. In reality, he was building a multi-million-pound empire. The farm that made just £144 profit in its first year is now worth an estimated £13 million. The brewery it spawned brings in more than £21 million a year. And yet most people watching Clarkson's farm have completely missed how any of this actually works, because the farm was never the product. The audience was. But to understand how Clarkson built his empire, we have to go back to 2008. And a decision that, at the time, looked completely ridiculous. The financial world was unraveling. Lehman Brothers had just collapsed. And while his contemporaries were either panicking or sitting on their cash, Jeremy Clarkson spent somewhere between £4.5 million and £6 million on 1,000 acres of Cotswold limestone farmland. His accountant reportedly needed to lie down. His friends thought he had gone peculiar, but Clarkson had understood something the city had spectacularly missed. British farmland doesn't just hold its value, it appreciates, quietly, reliably. When you die under agricultural property relief, the taxman gets nothing. Clarkson said it himself in 2021 in an interview with The Times. Avoiding inheritance tax, he admitted, was the critical thing in his decision to buy. That statement would come back to haunt him, but we'll get to that. Here's what makes the whole thing work. The farm doesn't need to make money. Amazon pays for the farm. Clarkson's Farm became Prime Video's most-watched British original series. Reports suggest the deal for 3 seasons was worth somewhere in the region of £160 million, with a further estimated £10 million a year for the Grand Tour. Every flooded field, every confrontation with the planning authority, every gloriously documented failure, all of it is content. All of it is revenue. On this farm, every disaster becomes part of the business model. The farm is simultaneously a 1,000-acre agricultural business and a television production facility. When Clarkson loses money on potatoes, Amazon writes him a check for filming him losing money on potatoes. This is not cynical. The farming is genuine, but it is monetized with extraordinary efficiency, and no ordinary farmer has that second column to fall back on. Nobody planned the farm shop. That is worth understanding. In his first season, Clarkson grew 40 tons of potatoes and discovered that supermarkets would not touch such a modest batch from an unknown supplier. So he put a shed in a field and started selling them directly. What followed was one of the more extraordinary retail phenomena in recent British memory. Within months of the show airing, people were driving from London and Manchester specifically to queue outside a converted agricultural building, and to pay slightly more than Waitrose prices for honey and a jar of something labelled cow juice. Police had to manage 3-mile traffic jams. The local council absolutely hated it. In a single year, the business went from £44,000 in assets and 6 employees to £1.3 million in assets and 17 employees. Not because Clarkson is a retail genius, he will tell you he is not, but because he had accidentally created something people desperately wanted. A direct connection to where their food came from, wrapped in the warmth of a television program they loved. Every visitor to Diddley Squat was marketing that no budget could replicate. The brewery followed the same logic. In 2020, Clarkson stood in a tractor shed staring at a ton of perfectly good barley that the grain merchants would not touch. He had been drinking British bitter his whole life. He had barley. So he found an existing brewery, Hawkstone, founded in 2005 in Gloucestershire, and struck a deal. Hawkstone Lager launched in October 2020. What began as a way to make use of unwanted grain quickly turned into something much bigger. The timing could hardly have been worse. The hospitality industry was emerging from lockdowns, competition was fierce, and the British beer market was already crowded with established brands fighting for shelf space. Yet Hawkstone had one advantage no startup brewery could buy. Millions of people were already emotionally invested in the bloke selling it. As Clarkson's audience grew, so did demand for the beer. What started as a side project built around surplus barley expanded into a national brand. By 2025, the business was generating more than £21 million in annual sales and had become one of the fastest-growing private companies in Britain. The brand is now stocked in more than 2,000 pubs and every major supermarket. According to the company, Hawkstone became the world's most followed beer brand on Instagram. Some parts of the brewing industry called it a vanity project. 5 years later, it is outselling craft beers that had spent decades building an audience. Then he bought a pub. Unlike the farm shop and the brewery, this one he went in with open eyes. The Farmer's Dog, a former pub in Asthall, Oxfordshire, cost him less than £1 million in 2023. He was warned it would be hard, that most pubs in Britain are closing, that staffing post-Brexit is a nightmare, that a British-only menu in a rural Oxfordshire village was not the obvious path to profit. He ignored all of it, and within its first 4 months, the pub recorded a loss of £8,486. Clarkson later admitted on Instagram that the only thing saving him from financial ruin was serving his own Hawkstone beer and cider at the bar. It is the one part of the empire that is not yet a clean success, but it generated another entire season of television drama, and Amazon found every difficult moment tremendously watchable. Here is what all of this was sitting on top of: agricultural property relief. The tax loophole that allowed farmland to pass between generations with no inheritance tax attached was the silent foundation under the entire structure. That 1,000-acre farm in the Cotswolds, now worth an estimated £12 to £13 million, was supposed to pass to Clarkson's children without the taxman extracting a shilling. That was the architecture. That was why the losses didn't matter. The farm didn't need to make money because the land itself was the retirement plan, tax efficient, appreciating, and protected by law. In October 2024, Rachel Reeves announced the autumn budget. From the 6th of April 2026, agricultural property relief would be capped. The first £1 million would still be protected. Beyond that, inheritance tax would start to bite. On a farm now worth £13 million, that is a bill in the region of £2.4 million. On the 19th of November 2024, Clarkson was among thousands of farmers outside Parliament protesting the change. The same man who had told The Times in 2021 that avoiding inheritance tax was his primary reason for buying. Both things can be true at once. The protest was genuine. The self-interest was also real. That tension is arguably more honest than most politicians will ever manage. Somewhere along the way, Clarkson stopped running a farm and started running an entire ecosystem built around it. Which raises the question that nobody in the Diddley Squat story ever quite answers. The system Clarkson built, Amazon's subsidized losses, land appreciation, and content-powered retail, is unique to him. 190,000 farm holdings in the UK cannot make the agricultural disasters of their year into a profitable streaming series. The 7% of the relief claimants who account for 40% of the total relief value, costing the Treasury £219 million, are not small family farms in crisis. Clarkson himself is worth an estimated £55 million. The new inheritance tax rules will hurt genuine family farms, where the land is everything and there is no Amazon deal cushioning the blow. Clarkson has done more than almost anyone to put farming on the cultural map, and he profits from a system that was never designed for someone with his resources. Both of those things are permanently, uncomfortably true. Because behind all the entertainment, the future of British farming is a lot more complicated than Jeremy Clarkson's television show would have you believe.